Hey guys, my name is Rai. Today, I wanted to walk through how I did my plus 17 Rookery on my Preservation Evoker. This includes debunking some of the range myths you might have about Prez, some of the combos and strategies I used, the mistakes I made, and what we did to get through this pretty difficult key. Mind you, this is a group of coordinated players and people I played with, and you've probably known some of the same names that you see on my other VODs. Our mage is Isis on his formerly Shadow Priest. We do have D-Wilks in here, Dretsu and Imora. In this call, you won't be able to hear what we do for coordinating stops, but I'm going to walk you through in each pack kind of what we do and kind of the communication we have to ensure our team's success. This is a really stop-heavy key, and what I mean by that is there's going to be a lot of CC going out from a team that's highly coordinated. This includes things like chains, solar beam, a pressing roar, mage stops, etc. to make sure that none of the casts go through. When you're watching this route, and I have some feedback from some of my other videos, keep in mind that you might not be able to replicate this unless you're in a coordinated setting or with classes or with a Discord call that can help support some of these more difficult pulls. Anyway, I'll get to the video. In the first pull here, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be pulling the Stormrook and the Thunderer on the left in addition to all the packs on the right. If you haven't seen this pull before in Rookery and you might be doing, a 10, 11, 12, this pull isn't really necessary, but on the higher keys, pulling these two mobs in on the first pull in Lust is going to be really high value as it lets you skip an entire pull in the dungeon, which we're going to see later in the video. In this first pull, you're going to notice that I don't use Tip the Scales. I do send a normal Fire Breath, and I'm just worried about my regular healing ramp here. Because we do have a Void Rider in this first pull, it's going to be a little bit more difficult for us to get through as there's going to be more mobs kind of going on as well. We're going to have those circles on the ground that we're going to have to dodge and watch for. Keeping this in mind, this first pull otherwise is no different, and we're going to be blasting the boss, and you're going to see here that I'm just hitting Living Flame and Disintegrate to keep up damage. One thing that you'll notice is I used absolutely no healing CDs on the first pull as I'm going to need them in the rest of the key. The upstairs trash in Rookery for healers is pretty difficult and can be quite challenging because you're going to have to deal with a couple things. The Void Rider AoE and as well any of the Stormwooks are going to do a focus cast lightning bolt that's going to channel over 3 seconds, kind of like a mind flay. The scariest point in this dungeon for any healer or DPS player is going to be the Void Rider plus Stormrook overlap, which you're going to see here in a moment. When I go into this pull, I want to make sure that I always have Tip the Scales and Stasis, and if I need to, use things like Zephyr. And when I'm targeted by a beam, I'm going to be using something like Obsidian Scales, which you see there, or Renewing Blaze. I go ahead and hit Rescue on our mage, I hit Tip the Scales, with that Echo, 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 Burn Embrace for Lifebind, and we're back into our first healing combo. You're going to see here that anytime somebody gets beamed down, I'm immediately hitting them with Echo Reversion and using Fire Breath to kind of top them in the party. I use Fire Breath pretty defensively here and not off cooldown for damage, but rather to help top up one of these Focus Chain Lightning casts. I do hit Zephyr there, and we do go into the next Localized Storm, but you can see that we're releasing that full stasis with Lifebind, with Echo, 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 Verdant Embrace, and Spirit Bloom is going to be able to top up my party quite well. I do hit Time Dilate on my mage just to get him for that last tick to make sure he doesn't go down. I did want to save Mass Barrier particular for this next pull so you could see that on the left hand side of the screen he is holding it. This pull here is one of the most coordinated pulls I think in this dungeon pool. Similar to Priory, there are a lot of pulls where you have a ton of casters in here and you really can't miss a stop or somebody's going to die. You'll see at the end of this pull we actually ended up having 1.5 deaths as I die to the next one, but we do get it grouped together with a range kick on this thing, a grip. We do use Solar Beam, Farm our Druid, and I'm prepping my first healing ramp. Echo, 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 Burn Embrace, and I'm starting to think about, because I don't yet have Stasis, if I need to use something like Emerald Communion, and I use Emerald Communion here to make sure that I get through the Lightning Bolt and Storm Rider overlap. We are calling stops one by one, and our tank is making sure that we have a stop succession for each one of these Lightning Bolt casts. On plus 17, you kind of get to the key level where any one of these bolts in like cohesion with like something else that happens, or like one of these chain lightning casts, is just going to kill your team off. So you can see here that Druid does just get lightning bolted as we have nothing left, and he gets kind of charged down. This was our first death in the key, and we do end up having one more really unlucky death up top. But you'll see that I follow the exact same healing pattern for each one of these pulls. I constantly have echoes out, and I'm constantly making sure that my team for each one of the Void Rider Storms is getting topped with that Echo, 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 Burn Embrace, Spirit Bloom, and as well having an additional button on top of that. For each one of these fixates, I'm always using Obsidian Scales or Renewing Blaze, and I'm helping with things like Zephyr and Rescue. We do get bugged out on this next pull, and you're going to see here that I get double fixated by the Stormhooks, and it shouldn't happen. I think there was supposed to be a bug fix that this wasn't supposed to happen, but you're going to see here there's one. And we're on the next set here. I get Lightning Bolted. 2 more sets. I'm using Fire Breath to top my team. Echo Reversion, and 1 and 2 are on me. Even though I hit Rescue, I died pretty much instantly even after hitting Scales, so I do take the Battle Res and make sure that we can get back in the pack. That shouldn't really happen, and I haven't seen that happen too frequently, but getting doubled is almost unlivable unless you have something like Emerald Communion. I could have time dilated myself, I don't think I was quick enough, but... For this next pull in the dungeon, what we're going to be doing is going over to this side of the dungeon, caging one mob, and then pulling these mobs into the boss for funnel. There are a lot of classes this season, such as Arcane Mage, that benefit immensely from having a couple extra mobs on the boss for funnel. In this, you're going to see that we rotate kicks on the one thunder, and then when the cage breaks, we're going to get the other thunder in, and we'll be able to bring a bunch of mobs into the boss. This in itself isn't too difficult, and you should have no issue, having to heal this if you do attempt this route. But you're going to see that every time one of these lightning torrent phases come out, I'm going to start that same healing combo to start off, which is Echo, 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 Burn Embrace, Spirit Bloom, and then I want to keep a Dream Breath or a Fire Breath, Leaping Flames combo to kind of top my team. You'll see that my team's never really in danger too much this fight, but because we do have Rook Guards and a Thunder in on boss, my tank's taking quite a bit of damage. I do Zephyr, and I think that there's no absolute right or wrong answer in terms of like what button you need to press in this fight, as nothing's going to one-shot you. I do like using my defensive abilities during the Lightning Torrent AoE phase as opposed to this phase, as nothing ever one-shots me, but you can get off some pretty sneaky rescues. And remember, if you need to, you can always just press something here because it's going to help your healing. If you're not life binding to heal up these combos, remember that your mastery is going to benefit more when you have higher health than your teammates. You'll see here that I am running pretty low in mana, but it doesn't really matter too much. I release my stasis, and now I'm pretty much just healing whatever I can up with rot damage. There's really not too much damage here. We're just pretty much watching the kick on the Thunder, which is now in on the fight, and we're hitting the boss. You'll see, even though with 2 deaths, we're pretty fast at this point in the key. Doing this route enables an entire last pull upstairs in this dungeon, which speeds things up quite a bit. Remember now, we're going to be at 44% as opposed to the regular 41%, because we also did pull that Void Rider and Thunder into the first pull. I do the Echo, 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 Verdant Embrace, Spirit Bloom, and my team is completely topped. I have had some viewers ask, and quite a few Twitch comments, Rye, why don't you use Echo on yourself at the end of a Lifeline ramp to give, Echo, 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 Verdant Embrace, Echo yourself, Spirit Bloom? And the real answer to that is you're pretty much just like always full topping the party no matter what. I think wasting the global on self Echo and the resource is kind of a waste of time in my opinion. And I really don't think that you need to do it. If you find yourself in a weird healing predicament or pattern that requires you to, heal your team like 120% healing immediately, like over like 1 or 2 seconds, you might have good luck just trying that out. And so what kind of the combo is it's a raid combo, and doing Echo, 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 Burn Embrace, Echo on self, and Spirit Bloom is technically more throughput, but it does cost you an extra global, and in Mythic Plus, that extra healing global can be very deadly. The reason why is Preservation is already very, very slow to cast, and as well its heal kind of cadence and setup time takes a while. Putting in an entire extra Echo global in your ramp can sometimes be very costly and can almost set you behind. Not because that heal itself will be slow, but because afterwards you might want that Echo for your next ramp, etc. You'll see here that I'm actually pretty at the end of this, although I'm not really scared. There's not really a lot of healing to do in this fight, and if I really needed to I could have called for an Innervate, but just spamming Disintegrate on boss, keeping out some TAs, and then hitting a big Spirit Bloom at the end of each of these globals is going to be kind of easy for me to top the team. Another big trick you'll notice here too that I use a lot and I talk about a lot of my videos is using Hover as a defensive ability. Remember, as Chronowarden, when you hit hover, you're going to get the warp benefit of 20% damage reduction immediately, diminishing over 3 seconds. Each time a one-shot happens, like the first boss, the second boss jumps, or even like you're about to get hit by one of these diffuser zaps, you can actually just press warp and you're going to get 20% damage reduction. For any of these diffuser packs, the first tick of the AoE is always the deadliest, as the Arcane Void always overlaps with the suck-in. You'll see here that I always prep stasis and tip the scales for the first healing ramp, and then I release it on the second. This pack is quite a bit scarier than the next pull in the dungeon because it does have 2 oracles, meaning that if we do miss a kick and somebody is to get overlapped with Arcane Void and this kind of diffuse gas, then they could get globaled pretty easily. But I'm not too worried, as my healing ramps on preservation, especially for this kind of healing, are nuts. Every single time, I'm always going to have a Lifebind Spirit Plume, which is going to top my team, and as well, I can kind of substitute anything in between with Zephyr, Obsidian Scales, Renewing Blaze, etc. I'd like to ideally save Emerald Communion for the Lust Pool, but I think we end up being okay here, and I do use a Life Spark proc before my big Spirit Plume on this AoE. You can see, even with all these crushers going on right now, our team's pretty topped and pretty healthy, and if I need to, I have Obsidian Scales, I have Renewing Blaze, I have Zephyr coming up in 49 seconds, and I can rescue if needed. You'll see here that the AoE is about to go out. I press a big Dream Breath, I get my Boomkin topped, I Echo, I big Spirit Bloom, and watching myself a little bit carefully for the Crusher jumps. Again, a lot of the healing in here doesn't have to be right away until the AoE and Arcane Void. You'll see that I hit hover there right at the exact same global Arcane Void came out, and I had a 20% damage reduction. I do hit Lifebind, I queue up a big Spirit Bloom, and I'm sitting at about 30% haste right now, so it tops my team pretty quick. And you can see that I have more than enough mana, and now every single healing button to go into the Lust Pool. I think there's only one more death in the key, and it's actually me on this next boss because I do something really stupid, but from here on out we're pretty safe, and we're going to be going into the more difficult part of the dungeon. Even from this point, you can see that Prez does not have many range issues in the key, but now we're going to start to see a little bit more of a complication. Some of these packs do involve, some pretty spread out mechanics, this next boss and the last boss, and I'm going to show you guys some tricks and some hints to be able to deal with it. I do Zephyr the Go, I hit Renewing Blaze, and immediately I'm in my healing ramp with Tip the Scales, Lifebind. I do take that Arcane Bolt, and I immediately hit that Obsidian Scales. I do have every healing button available to get through this pack, and you can see that my team's health really isn't moving too much. I do include in my Lifebind ramp the tank for this next one. I hit Verdant Embrace coming out here on the first AoE pull, and as well, we're going to be completely topped for this AoE. I release Stasis, and if I need to, I have Emerald Communion and Rewind to be able to get through this pack. I think the hardest part about this pack from a healer is actually not these double diffusers, it's actually the Oracle casts that go off in conjunction with the Arcane Void. Missing those kicks is going to be pretty deadly, and if you see your team struggling, this is a great place to use Time Dilation or just immediately slam that Rewind if somebody gets low. This is a pull where you need to be extremely proactive as opposed to reactive and have healing out at all times, because you never know when your team's going to go down. On this boss, you're going to notice we do something here, and we're going to be abusing AMS from the DK to be able to completely negate the jump. As you can see, I pre-hover, and our mage used Mass Barrier for the first AoE to make sure that we're completely topped. I'm using Echo, Verdant Embrace, and now I'm just hitting the boss with Living Flame. Ideally on this fight, as a Preservation Evoker, you're kind of trying to start ramping Stasis on one of these jumps and then releasing it when you kind of need to. You'll see here, I hit Stasis, I hit Spirit Bloom, I hit a Warp to get over here, a Dream Breath, and I just throw any kind of Echo or kind of a filler spell in my Stasis as I didn't put a TA. At that point, putting anything else in my Stasis would have been a little bit of a waste. This Crush Reality, I'm making sure that I hit hover on the release, or I'm hitting some sort of defensive ability. That time I hit Obsidian Scales as I had the debuff. And now for the Dark Gravity, I can easily hit my Tip the Scales and Spirit Bloom and top my party. This fight is truly one of attrition, and you can see I didn't even go in with full mana, so I have to be a little bit careful how I spend. But each one of the Crush Realities, again, I want to make sure I pre-hover, or I have some sort of button on me, and then I want to make sure that I'm keeping some sort of healing ramp to top my team up quickly. If you do not have a DK on this fight does get quite a bit more challenging, but it is very manageable. Make sure you're using things like time dilation on targets that don't have a defensive, such as watching your druid's bark skin, your mage's, ice gold. And this is the mistake I was talking about a little bit earlier. I did just, randomly walk into that puddle, not thinking it would kill me for 2 seconds, but we do end up recovering here. Remember, now we have no battle res left in the key, and I kind of have to recover my team a little bit here to make sure that we are topped up for the next part of the encounter. I do hit Emerald Communion because we are lifebound, and I wanted to get caught up a little bit, and I do end up taking this dot with Obsidian Scales for embracing myself and getting myself topped. I'm not too scared. I do have Renewing Blaze coming up, and if I need to, I have things like Rewind and Time Dilation. As the leap comes out, I immediately hit that Life Bind, I hit that Spirit Bloom, and my party is already more than topped. I do kind of fortuitously luck out and pre-rescue my druid on that debuff. We both kind of laughed about it, as part of it was like, dude, there's no way you pre-rescued me on that. I got really lucky. I just kind of had a feeling it was going to target me or him. It'd been a while, so I did manage to get a full value rescue out of my druid. And again, for every one of these crushes, you'll see that I use Echo, 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 Burn Embrace, Spirit Bloom. With this specific group, this was a resilient key, but this was a one-shot for the first time we tried with this 5-stack. I did try this key earlier in the day on Resilience with some other players, and we were kind of in here for an hour dying to like some of the pulls upstairs because of kicks and stops, but overall, I was pretty happy with this run, and you can see that our timer is pretty good. This is a pretty tight key now, as it does involve you to do some pretty crazy pulls to live. You'll see that I used that pre-hover there on that crush, and I'm back to hitting the boss. This whole fight, I've stayed pretty mana neutral with about the 25 to 30% range, and I'm watching really carefully about how I spend. I don't want to overspend or underspend on this fight, because if I underspend, it's going to result in somebody dying, and if I overspend, I can run I do hit that warp or that hover right before the crush, and that is the last one of the fight. We are moving on. As we get into this pull of the dungeon, we're going to be fighting a couple Void Ascendants over the next couple minutes. Anytime you're fighting a Void Ascendant, you want to watch for 2 things. 1, make sure that you're kicking it if you don't see that your team has a kick available, and 2, you want to make sure that you have those echoes out into a Lifebind Spirit Bloom combo. This Attendant can either proc a Frontal or proc his Feasting Void, and you'll see here that I just use a big Spirit Bloom, and even on the ski level, my team is perfectly topped. Remember, I'm not stacking Mastery, I am pretty haste stacked, so I don't really need anything crazy to top the Fester. But one thing I would note is it's always going to alternate between the 2 queues. So in your time you're fighting one of these Attendants, make sure that if you see the Frontal, you should have some Echoes out and get ready to start topping for the next Void. One other thing you can do as well is make sure that you're always alternating Blaze and Scales if you think you're having a tough time, and remember, this debuff is dispellable, which is going to help you immensely. This route has considerably changed since the first time I posted a Rookery video at the very start of the season, when I was only 640 item level, but now we're going to show you what we do here. As you pause for a second, I'm going to show you that we actually end up using a Parasol skip down here, which you might have seen on streams by now, and skipping all of the Void Souls and stuff on the left. That count is very inefficient, and going down this way enables us to pull 2 Void Ascendants at the exact same time. You're going to see that my tank is going to gather both, we're going to get them kicked in, but it also does mean that we're going to have to deal with 2 of the Void Ascendant AoEs synced up one after the other. It's very critically important if you are doing this pull, or if you're planning to do a double Void Ascendant pull, they do have Stasis and Tip to Scales available, or at least Emerald Communion or Rewind. Even though it is healable without these buttons, it's going to help you immensely, as you're also going to have to deal with these Void Cursed Crushers that are going to be leaping on your party. There might be bolts going out with 2 Void Ascendants that you're going to have to kick, and if one goes through at the same time of Feasting Void, you are going to have somebody potentially go down without a big damage reduction effect. I am waiting for my tank at this point, and we're kind of sitting down here waiting for the gather to come together. You'll see all of us are parasoled on this corner, Our tank pulls the far Ascendant, or Ascendant. We pull the close, we're watching kicks. I get a fire breath out for a little bit of healing. We kick. I go echo, 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 burn embrace. And then what you're going to be seeing here is immediately I hit tip the scale, Spirit Bloom, and my team is instantly topped. I have all my healing out here, and I don't have to release my stasis quite yet, as I do have another life bind available, and it just tops my team up pretty quickly. This pack is very efficient as it lets you kind of skip almost 2 entire pulls in the dungeon instead of playing these one at a time. You can see a kick does go through there as I missed it, and we're waiting for these frontals to finish. Once this frontal finishes, I am going to have a Feasting Void, and immediately I just release my stasis and it pretty much stops my team. One thing you'll note there, and a mistake I did make, was I didn't actually get the life bind off on that Feasting Void, which made it a little bit slower for me to top. If I did get the life bind there, my team would have been topped instantly and I could have saved 2 or 3 globals, but unfortunately I made a little bit of a mistake there and healed too early as opposed to healing too late. I do Zephyr this first Void AoE, I Spirit Bloom, and I get my team topped. One trick to note that on these consuming Voidstones is if you have players that have a Shadow Meld ability, they can Shadow Meld off the stacks, which as you can see in the top and right hand corner, reduces the damage that you deal these Voidstones. Feasting Void comes out, I have Echo, 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 Burn Embrace Lifebind, and my team is instantly topped away from the debuff. When these Voidstones hit 40%, they're going to go into their pulsing AoE phase of their mechanic. What you're going to see here is I always have either Stasis or Tip the Scales ramp for these Voidstones, as they are exceptionally deadly. You'll see here that I Lifebind early, and I set up my Stasis, and on that tick, I perfectly time the Spirit Bloom to handle the first AoE tick. I Dream Breath the second, I Burn Embrace the third, and now I'm just using a little bit of triage healing before I release my Stasis. My stasis is released, and now all I have to do is top my team with one more big button, and I decide to use Tip the Scales. Once Tip the Scales is out and Temporal Burst is active, I now have unlimited healing, and we did decide that we are going to do this pack first, so we have to be careful about not pulling the boss. The benefit of doing this is that you can actually chain whatever mobs you want into the boss, as opposed to just, waiting for the boss RP to start. Once the Voidstone kind of finishes the AoE cycle, we can pull all of it in the boss and have funnel into the boss for our Arcane Mage. Again, this consuming Voidstone can still be pretty deadly, so we want to make sure we're taking the right precautions about healing it. I would recommend that once 40% is coming on your screen, as you can see 50, 55, I start sitting out those echoes immediately, or at least have like some sort of healing ramp here. I do hit the Communion, which covers 2 complete ticks if I do it late enough. I hit Zephyr into a big Spirit Bloom, and I'm using Echo, Echo, Burn Embrace, and then if I need to, I can use things like a Life Spark proc, a Dream Breath, or if I really wanted to, I could use Rewind. But as you'll see, Prez has a pretty easy time healing this, and our toolkit's pretty strong. Your tank can get Mega Zapped on this trash build as well, as you'll see drops pretty low, but we do end up pulling these 2 Crushers into boss, and we're ready to play the fight. I'm going to pause the video for a second so I can kind of talk through my positioning and the decisions I make on this fight as a healer. One important thing to note is Prez is not as limited as many people think. It's pretty much no different than playing any other healer on this fight. Everybody's going to be spread out, and you have to make decisions on who you want to dispel and who you want to press an external on. One crazy important note that you can use in this fight is you can actually stasis dispel the dots. And you're going to see when I have stasis up, I'm actually going to be pre-dispelling and then releasing stasis to dispel 2 debuffs at once. You can use this off cooldown or however you feel like, but remember in this group I have no dwarf characters, meaning that I actually have nobody that can cleanse the debuff themselves. This means that for this entire fight, I'm going to be very crafty and creative about who I dispel, and when I need to use things like Spatial Paradox to be able to get through this key. Our first debuffs are coming out here, and I haven't yet prepped my stasis, so I do press a healing stasis, and I walk out of the group and I dispel myself. The reason why I used a healing stasis was because we still those crushers up, and I got a little bit scared about their kind of jumps on my team. But otherwise, we should be pretty okay, and you're going to see the positioning of Dretsu, D-Wilks, myself on the left, and our mage on the right. I immediately dispel D-Wilks, and I'm kind of just flying over to my mage. Nobody, even if they had to play really far, I could press Spatial Paradox and be able to cover them pretty quickly. But ideally, you know, this isn't as bad as many people think it is. I'm hitting some echoes where I can to cover the healing, and I'm just choosing a dispel that's not myself as a priority. I do immediately hit Time Dilation on my DKs, he falls a little bit low, and I hit Rewind here. As a healer, you should always try to be getting the crystals as opposed to your DPS players. I think giving them more uptime in this fight is going to be very beneficial. I do hit Spatial Paradox and want to make sure that for our burn, that our Boomkin doesn't have to hit anything like Health Pot or Waste Globals in bear form. It was probably a pretty bad Spatial Paradox on my part, but Spatial Paradox does give you unlimited range in this fight to be able to get a Dispel even if you're really far away or cut off from anybody. Now we're back to just hitting the boss. I did save Tip the Scales for Temporal Burst and Threads of Fate for this phase, meaning that I was able to give my team some multi-strike during the burn, and we're going to have it back for our lust burn at the end of the fight. I am starting to think about if I want to use Stasis Dispel at any point. I dispel our Boomkin, I'm watching our DK, I give him a rescue, and immediately we're back to kind of being spread out on this encounter. Our DK is trying to drop in the back and he takes a lot of unnecessary curse damage, but that's okay as I do manage to get through it. I do Time Dilate myself from the puddle to make sure that we live, and our DK is going to have to get healed once again. You'll see here that this is probably the sketchiest this fight ever gets because I'm trying to make sure that, you know, we're not in puddles while also being mindful that our DK gets enough healing and that our team's in range. I do jump over here just to get our druid in range, but I'm not too worried about him here as I hit a life bind. I hit Emerald Communion, and I'm being cognizant of where the debuffs might be. One's on me, one's on our DK, and I am able to heal us up pretty easily. Need to make sure that our DK stays alive here, and we managed to get that crystal. Again, by this point in the fight, you'll see that I haven't really struggled too much, but our team's also being cognizant of positioning. Remember, this isn't a Prez only thing. Every healer does not want you to be 50, 60, 70 yards away. It makes it very hard to use things like Power Infusion, use things like Efflorescence, Chain Heal, etc. So you want to make sure that you're giving your healers a pretty easy time. You're not limited to room on this boss, and if you need to spread out or do absolutely anything, it's more than fine. You'll see here that I hit the Dispel on my Druid, I heal my DK, I release Tip the Scales, and we're sitting here and back to blasting the boss. One choice I didn't like that I made here was I used Tip the Scales before the burn. Tip the Scales can actually be a ton of damage, especially in damage amps, and I kind of wasted my team's time by using Tip the Scales on, you know, healing as opposed to damage. Doesn't matter too much though, as this last burn, remember, we do have Bloodlust. As we're at 100 million on the shield, we're getting ready to Bloodlust, and we're hoping that we can kill the boss in this burn. My Druid does have a charge of Incarnate, my DK is going to have Unholy Frenzy, and my Mage is going to have Arcane Surge. The reason why we chose to Bloodlust late is because Arcane Mage does get execute value from this boss, and it's going to be a lot of extra damage. I do hit a Dispel on my DK, I let my Mage sit for a second, I go over, I heal him, and now we're in the execute phase of the fight. My Dream Breath and Nature's Vigil are able to top our team up pretty quickly, and now we're just making sure that the boss dies before the next shield. With that in mind, that is how I time my plus 17 Rookery on my Preservation Evoker. This was kind of fun, as you know, I think everybody on our team kind of got partials for it, and it was big points for the Mage and I, so that was kind of a neat key for us, but hopefully this debunks a couple of the things about Pres range and maybe helps explain a little bit better the high-end strategy for doing this key in Mythic Plus. There are a bunch of different routes now for Rookery and a bunch of different approaches you can take, but as you know, as usual, there's no real other Pres Evoker that I can really chat to too much about some of these strategies, so you know, take my approaches with a grain of salt. If something works better for you, then it might be better overall. You know, I like being challenged on kind of my approaches and healing some of these fights, so With that in mind, I know it's been a week or so since I posted a video, been pretty busy, but thank you for all the support, and if you think I missed anything, drop something in the comments. What else would you like to see? And if you think I'm missing something from my channel, feel free to chime in on that too. Anyway, I'll catch you guys in the next one.